Finally, our first Japanese manufacturer and car on the channel. 皆さんこんにちは。RBR へようこそ。そしてランドクルーザーの世界へようこそ。ジドコと改善から生まれた伝説の車です。そして素晴らしい歴史とともに。僕の日本語が少し下手ですが、どうぞ許してください。That is all the Japanese you're getting out of me today. I'm still learning. Guys, again, a warm welcome to our first Japanese manufacturer. It's always exciting to get a new manufacturer on the channel, but even more so when that manufacturer is known for reliability, indestructibility, and is an absolute powerhouse that is dedicated to this idea that I mentioned of Kaizen, continuous self-improvement. And nobody does that quite like Toyota, and no car does it quite like the 70 plus years and 10 million plus units of this, the famed Land Cruiser. But Toyota's story didn't even begin with cars. It started in the most unimaginable place over 100 years ago in the textile industry with a man called Sakichi Toyoda, who was an inventor obsessed with efficiency, and he created this automatic loom that would stop even if a single thread had broken during the process. And this idea of building intelligence into the machine shapes Toyota even today in their principle of Jidoka, which is essentially automation with a human touch. And like I said, still something proudly referenced by Toyota today. And that company and that passion was inherited by his son, Kiichiro Toyoda, who had also future vision in his mind. And in the early 1930s, he visited car factories in both Europe and the USA because, from what he saw, Japan needed to master the art of motor car making. So a few years later, in 1933, he set up an automotive sector within the Toyota Automatic Loom company. And a few years later, in 1935, created their first cars. One was the A1 sedan, and the second, the G1 truck. Now, they weren't incredible cars by any sense of the imagination, but they proved one thing, that Toyota were able to build cars that were good. And a few years later, in 1937, he finally set up the Toyota Motor Company. And even today in Japan, he is respectfully called Kiichiro Toyoda-san for his immense contribution to Japanese industry. And you may be thinking the Toyoda name is different to Toyota. Well, Toyota, the company, was renamed to because it takes 8 brushstrokes, which is essentially luckier and considered more auspicious in Japanese culture, hence the name Toyota now. But the true successor to the Land Cruiser itself would come much later. Now, in the 1940s, much of the world was at war, as was Japan. So when the Imperial Army needed a new 4x4 to replace their aging scout vehicles, they turned to Toyota. And around about this time, they'd captured an American Willys Jeep. So they handed that to them and other manufacturers to have a look at. And from that inspiration was born Toyota's first 4x4, which was the AK-10. Now, this wasn't a huge success. I think they barely made 100 of them. It had a 4-cylinder from their sedan with part-time 4-wheel drive. But what it didn't give Toyota in sales, it gave them in experience that they would then use later on. Now, of course, Japan's industry was shattered after the Second World War. But when the Korean War reared its head in 1950 and the newly set up police reserve under USA oversight was set up, they needed a locally made, robust and strong 4x4 to do the duties that were required of it. So they turned to Toyota. The USA provided some specs to them, and what came out of it was the first true successor to the Land Cruiser, which was the Toyota BJ. B for the B-type large 6-cylinder engine, and J for the Jeep format of that vehicle. And this vehicle immediately made headlines. When in 1951, that Toyota BJ drove further up Mount Fuji than any other car before it, up to the 6th station. And it was a publicity masterstroke, because not only did it prove to Japan that they could make incredible indestructible cars, but it proved it to the rest of the world. And then in 1954, it finally got a name worthy of that, and that was given to it by executive Hanji Umehara, and that was the Land Cruiser, deliberately sounding like Land Rover, but to signify something more special and endearing. And that storied history then brings us to this car today, which is our brand new Land Cruiser J250. which harkens back, I think, more than any other modern Land Cruiser has. Redesigned from the ground up as a retro-facing but internally modernized version of that legend, there's as much to celebrate about what's new as there is about what hasn't changed in this car. So today, alongside peeling under the skin to see what has and hasn't changed, and of course going for a drive, I will also talk about the cultural phenomenon that this car is around the world and what it means to different countries. Places like Pakistan, places like Japan, the Middle East, and of course here in the UK. So guys, super excited to dive into this new manufacturer for us, and that is Toyota with their incredible Land Cruiser. Now guys, this tiny little device here is our sponsor today, and it is going to be the super weapon for any car owners or enthusiasts out there, and this is the OBDeleven 3. This tiny device is actually a powerful diagnostic tool that is tiny. It weighs next to nothing. It will fit in your pocket that either you can store in your car or take with you when you're going to view a used one. And in both of those scenarios, it's going to be a secret weapon. And remember to use my code RBR before I forget to get the biggest discount you can possibly right now in their winter sale. All you do is plug it into your car's OBD unit, and then it immediately connects to their app and begins scanning the car's various modules and then revealing any potential hidden faults. Now just imagine how perfect that is going to be for spotting issues when you go to view a used car. You could be saving yourself thousands of pounds. For me, one of the worst feelings as a car owner is when you're in your car and suddenly a warning light pops up. For me, I just want to deal with it, not in days or weeks. I want to deal with it right there and then. I hate it. And with a device like this, at the very minimum, you can diagnose it. At best, you might be able to even clear the fault without having to spend a penny. And the other great thing is it's officially licensed by BMW, Toyota, Lexus as today, and Ford. But that's not the best part. I've talked about diagnosis. The best thing is the one-click apps that you can use in their ultimate plan. One great example of this is modern BMW M cars that use active sound design, pumping sound through the speakers. You can turn that off using this module. You can play with the lights outside the car. You can play with the sounds that the car makes. But perhaps more importantly for modern cars like plug-ins, you can read fault codes with the high voltage system, which is something you wouldn't get access to normally, but this little thing can help you with. Now, like I said, because it's the season, OBDeleven's winter sale is live right now, and with the code RBR, you get a big discount. 25% off plus 5%, but make sure you use the code because the link I've given you down below doesn't auto-apply it. Use the code to get the biggest discount you can. Get a great gift for a fellow car enthusiast or for yourself. A huge thanks to OBDeleven for supporting this episode of RBR, and to you guys for always supporting our regular sponsors. Let's get back to the car. So guys, in the 70 plus years that BJ car traveled up Mount Fuji, Toyota sold 10 million plus units of this car to over 170 countries. It's their longest surviving nameplate. But what you need to understand about the Land Cruiser is, it is not just a car, it's a symbol. It's a symbol of power, respect, durability and reliability. And perhaps nowhere more so than Pakistan. One of the first places that Toyota ever exported a car to was Pakistan in 1954 alongside Saudi Arabia to test the car in much harsher road and climate conditions. And it didn't just become a popular car in Pakistan, it literally shaped the entire foundation of the car culture in that place. I mean, when I go there and I speak to uncles and just men in general about what I do, they all know what I do, that I'm a car journalist, and they ask the inevitable question that what do you drive? And I tell you, it's a struggle.
जी तो बेटे कोई अच्छी गाड़ी तो चलाते होगे ना?
जी अंकल, ये मेरी गाड़ी है, पोर्शे
है कि ये यार ये गाड़ी है, ये तो खिलौना है।
ओ नहीं यार, सुने तो GT3 बड़ी तेज गाड़ी है।
वो तेजी तक ही करना है, ये गाँव शाव जा सकती है, पहाड़ चढ़ सकती है ये गड्डी।
नहीं, गाँव तो नहीं।
तो बस गल खत्म, तू भी प्राडो ले और मैं भी लेना।
नहीं नहीं, आप ही सही हैं, मेहरबानी। And nothing I ever say can ever convince them otherwise. And that's fascinating to me because the car doesn't just sell there. It literally formed that country's entire automotive identity. Even today, you talk to people and the Prado or the Cruiser is like just the king of the road because it symbolizes authority. It symbolizes success. It's that car that either people have attained or want to attain to say, look, I've made it in life. They have this phrase there, V8 hai? Like, do you have a V8? Because the Land Cruisers of old were so synonymous with that deep, burbly V8. and it's almost like a cultural reflex for them. And then you look in their popular culture and say Pakistani dramas or films, when the Land Cruisers turn up 1, 2, 3 after the other, either it's the hero in episode 1 of a drama, slow motion coming out of the car, taking his sunglasses off, or you know it's the villain of the film. Either way, someone who's made it, someone you want to be, someone in authority is driving or sitting in the Land Cruiser. And they're also literally everywhere in the country, whether it's in the diplomatic enclaves of Islamabad or the streets of DHA in Lahore, Karachi. And then there's different specs that belie different statuses as well. So black are kind of the protocol cars for, you know, the politicians or indeed the villains, etc. Then you've got the white cars that are kind of more for the average person who wants to show a more luxurious spec. It's a really fascinating car identity out there. But it's not just the symbol either. It's also the trust in that badge. Because think about it, it's been decades of people using these cars in much harsher conditions than we know, in mountains and through floods and to and back from the village, and transporting their whole families, doing their entire work and home life with these cars, knowing that it's dependable. Even now you go to the villages and you'll see decades old cruisers being used by people perfectly fine, and they kind of get inherited through generations because people might expire, but this damn thing is indestructible. And it's not just in Pakistan. Okay, look at Africa, where it's the car of choice for farmers, explorers, NGOs, the UN. You look at Australia, it's like, you know, the backbone of the outback there. You could tow your damn house if you need to. A place like the UAE, it's the king of the sand dunes. It commands respect on the road despite being, you know, in a flood of G-Wagons and other, you know, more illustrious cars. And now you understand the weight of history that the car holds. And that brings us neatly then to our new one, following on from the J150 into this J250, which now completely redesigned from the ground up with the retro-facing outside. Now we'll get back to that cool retro boxy shape, because underneath it lies a whole new architecture. And that is the TNGA F chassis, which is shared with things like the Hilux, the Tundra and the Lexus GX. And this is 50% more rigid. It's got a 30% stiffer connection between the chassis and the body. And all of this means better handling, better ride, better for off-roading, and better crash and durability, which of course is so important for this car. Then the suspension has been significantly improved now with a double wishbone setup with longer travel, new geo. We've got a fixed four-link suspension with better articulation. Toyota says all these changes have helped it make a less truck-like feeling for the passengers, which is great. We've got electrically assisted steering for the first time rather than hydraulic, which again should help with vibrations. And crucially, that allows then for this to have driver aids and assistance systems for the first time, like lane trace assist, which is quite a game changer for this car. The engine in this is the 2.8 litre D4D turbo diesel engine that produces in this 204 PS and 500 Newton meters. That's paired alongside an all-new 8-speed gearbox, replacing the 6-speed. That's meant to be much smoother and has better low-end torque delivery, and it can tow together about 3.5 tons. Toyota say that they chose this engine for its renowned reliability to begin with, and then later on they're going to have mild hybrids and petrol options. The four-wheel drive system uses a central locking differential with a low range transfer case and has surface detection through its multi-terrain select as well. There's also a crawl control for low-speed off-roading and downhill assist control. Another fantastic feature is this disengageable front anti-roll bar that allows for way better wheel articulation when you're doing off-roading that can then reconnect as soon as you get back on the tarmac, and that's all doable from a button inside the car. Underbody protection and cooling have been upgraded too. So as with that idea of Kaizen, it is continuous self-improvement. It's still the same Land Cruiser, but just better pretty much in every area. And in Toyota's own words, all done to preserve the indestructible core. Speaking of the shape then, let's talk about the design, because we all got so excited when we first saw this car's pics come out, particularly the first edition with the round lights, because it all harkens back so well in its retro styling to the older cars like the 40 series or the 60 series, particularly on the front end and its uprightness and this reshaped, I think, bolder bonnet and wheel arches. Every angle of this car you look at, it is modern, undoubtedly, but it's also such a great throwback to what made those cars so wonderful. I like the square lights on our car today as well. They're nice. It's a shame that the round ones were saved only for that first edition car. It's also a shame that our car is in this protocol spec, as we like to call it, because I think you lose a lot of the amazing structure that you see, say, in the Sand car, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. Luckily, I can show you that here anyway. But yeah, maybe they should allow that option of the round lights just for anyone else as well. From the side, you can see how the proportions are more upright and square with that really flat bonnet. As I said, you've got the vertical A-pillars. It feels more upright. The shoulder line is lowered, so you get a better view on the inside, as I'll show you later. But the wheel arches look strong with unashamed use of rougher materials. You've got nice curves and a really wonderful window line, I think, that is much better than what it used to be. Defined edges around your A-pillar. Even the roof bars look fantastic. Now it is quite boxy, but despite the way it looks, being wider and longer and more boxy than before, they've actually improved the efficiency. They've improved the approach angle as well on the front end. And they've improved the noise in regards to the wind noise on motorways, thanks to the way that this has been designed. At the back, the tailgate and rear lamps continue the theme of functional design. They're squared, they're easy to repair according to Toyota, and even the rear bumper is now easier to remove or replace if damaged off-road. And overall, Toyota calls this design functional beauty, where everything is there to serve a purpose, and where, in their own words, it can look at home whether it's parked in a desert or on a city street. I love how self-aware they are in terms of how different the culture of the Land Cruiser is, depending where the car is in the world. And as for what's available in the UK, other than that first edition that came out initially, which is no longer available, we have only this one, which is called the Invincible. And that's the only version available. There's hardly any options. There's just paint. There's no interior options. There's roof bars, I think. So everything I'm showing you today, outside and inside and when driving, is basically the standard car. Later on, there is a commercial version coming with just 2 seats at around about 60k, so bear that in mind as well. Next, we need to get on to the interior, because the exterior has had a really nice throwback, and the interior is now modernized, but so refreshingly familiar. So guys, first impressions jumping into the new Land Cruiser. It feels refreshingly familiar. It feels like this could be an interior from the 90s, and I mean that as a compliment, yet it is still digital where it needs to be. It feels logical, like not a lot of explaining would be needed to people of older or newer generations. The visibility is panoramic, I would describe it, with really thin A-pillars. I can see every edge of the bonnet. I can see around the edges of the side of the doors. I think a lot of this must be geared towards that off-roading visibility element. You've got soft touch in the key touch points where the leather is actually quite soft and cushiony, which is quite nice. But then you've got harder elements in those areas where they know that the car is going to take more abuse when it's being used properly. And yes, a beautiful proper gear stick in 2025. I love to see it. And I really do think the interior tries to match the exterior. We look at even the brand new steering wheel that they have here, which is chock full of buttons and easy to understand buttons as well. Exactly what does what, no explaining needed. It looks like the front grille in a lot of ways. There's a lot of symmetry. And then you just look at the general dashboard structure here. With, I think, more buttons than Mercedes probably has in their entire lineup of cars added together versus this car. That shows you that this is really made for a purpose and they understand their customer. But this entire structure, very logical, and I think a huge upgrade versus the previous one in terms of its look as well. It's not necessarily super modern, it's just structured more like the outside, where it's more blocky, it's more direct, it's more purposeful, it feels to me. I love the vents, for example. You've got the turbine style vents on each side, but then the more classic looking Land Cruiser ones in the middle, but modernized, but still very satisfying to move around. It's all this kind of horizontal, vertical, very square look, both inside and outside, and it merges really well together, like better than I think any Land Cruiser has in the past. Your seating position, high and commanding, but doesn't feel truck-like like the G-Wagon, if that makes sense. And that's something I think they've kind of done on purpose. So it's a nice high position. You've got great visibility. You've got the massive panoramic roof as standard as well. Then everything else is set in logical layers. So your steering and your driving is at your top layer with all of those control elements. You come a bit lower, then you've got your off-roading buttons and that entire control panel. And then as you get lower, you get more and more storage, and there's a lot of storage in this car. This, you'd think it's bigger. There's a smaller box in here, but it is a cool box, which is awesome. How cool is that? There's got to be a better way to say that. You've got space for a 1 litre bottle inside your doors, which of course, you know, it's so useful. More space, a little bit in there. But then it's got the modern touch as well of having USB-Cs here, HDMI port, wireless car charger, and we'll get into that technical element in a minute. And of course that pairs to our central screen here, 12.3 inches, and the 12.3 inch central driver display as well, which of course all of this standard in the UK, as I said, everything you see here being standard. So it's got that digital side as well with all this analog element. That new digital side runs Toyota's new Smart Connect Plus, which I found to be pretty decent. The logical ability of this system is different to what we're used to than the Germans. So for me, it took a bit of getting used to, and it's not quite as, it's quite a monochromatic look, particularly in this middle. But I got used to it. It's got wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as well, so you don't need to worry about that element. Driver zone, like I said, all digital. The looks of it changes depending what mode you're in from the mode select here, which is a lovely round button, just like Land Cruisers of old. We'll get into that in a sec. I found that screen to be a bit laggy, and there's so many options actually hidden within that you should really operate only when you're standing still. And that's been a bit of a struggle. One of those struggles was turning off the dreaded speed dong, which is so far deep within there. I think they've almost hidden it in there so you can't ever reach it. And something Toyota may want to understand is that European drivers do need to access that as a shortcut, because speed limits aren't always correct in terms of what the car recognizes. Apart from that, there's a lot of info you can get within the drive zone, and you can choose kind of the off-roading elements or more day-to-day information for your liking. So it's nice that that's all up to date versus other manufacturers. Then the central console, which is pure Land Cruiser DNA with your round knobs, your proper gear selector, and the dedicated off-road section here. So all of that wonderfully analog, retro, but super usable for off-roading. And this has all been designed for muscle memory, which is why we've got so many buttons, so that when you're off-roading, when you're driving, you get used to all these things, where they are, and you don't need to look down, you don't need to go into a silly touchscreen to access them. They are here physically. And finally, in terms of visibility, one fantastic thing is the 360 view camera that also shows you what's under the car after you've passed it. We've seen it in other manufacturers, but the 360 camera in this, because it's so geared towards off-roading, I found to be unbelievable in the detail and the speed within which it provides that information, particularly underneath the car. So really useful. Now the seats, very, very comfortable. Like I said, nice and soft leather. This particular car, these are 7-seat cars now. So you've got the additional third row. You've got your second row, which is again, very comfortable. You have the ability to slide and recline that second row. Loads of leg room thanks to the longer cabin floor. And then there's the third row, which folds completely flat into the floor when not in use, or pops up with a single button pull when you need it. Rear passengers also get their own air vents and USB-C ports, and Toyota's even added sound insulation and softer trim around the second row for better comfort on those longer drives. Boot and practicality. With the third row down, you've got a completely flat load floor, so you can store tons in there. There's lots of tough plastic around the tailgate, metal tie-down points, etc. All here for utility. And the tailgate itself is one piece now, no split rear door, making it easier to open in tight spaces. So this interior is brilliant. I think it's got that analog charm with the technical ability as well, but never loses that feel of mechanical honesty. I just wish there was more colors, because I think if you could break up the color, if there was a color option, you'd appreciate the interior a lot more than this plain black one. I get it's there for utility, but still, that would be great to see. But it is refreshingly analog in that sense. And the other thing that is actually refreshingly analog is the way that this car drives. Let's take it for a drive right now. So guys, the first thing and the first impression and the first overall feeling that you need to understand is this is not your traditional modern day 4x4 that's a cosseting car impression. The Land Cruiser very much does things its own way. And if you come into this expecting X5, Q7, GLE, GLS That is not what you're going to get. This is very much more truck-like in its feeling. And I don't mean that in a negative way at all. I'm saying you come into this and you get the feeling that you would get when you're driving something like the G-Wagon, something like the Defender. And there's an element of driving those cars that is so special, and that also exists within this car. It's not trying to mimic a normal road vehicle, a car, a luxury sedan. It is unapologetically a 4x4. And there's a certain charm to that when you first start driving it, and it influences your style of driving immediately as well. Now this is a big car, but surprisingly easy to maneuver. Nice light steering, which is good for daily duties. The engine sound as well, it's appropriate for this type of car. It feels and reminds me again, I come back to those other cars that I mentioned, and it feels appropriate in that way. You've got that singular exhaust in the back, so it's not going for that refined engine note. It's, you know, unashamed to be a truck, and I really do like that. And first impressions on suspension is better than previous Land Cruisers for daily duties so far. Now let's get on to the engine. Like we said, not a huge amount of power, right? Only 200 horsepower, essentially, with 500 Newton meters. Those are figures that my E53 can achieve without even touching the engine, just from the electric side of that car. But what you have to understand is, this is the appropriate power for this vehicle, and it actually does work. Once the engine warms up, yes, the 0 to 60 is incredibly slow, but that's not something you do. That's not your driving style in this car. What you require is the power and the torque when you need it. And, you know, honestly, this doesn't feel as slow as it should, considering the size of this car versus the power, particularly when you go into sport mode. So, you know, in that sense, the power has been absolutely okay. Now, the other great surprise was the 8-speed. And I've driven the Land Cruiser a lot in Pakistan, as you may have gathered. And this 8-speed is buttery smooth compared to the old 6-speed. Really, really good for daily stuff. And I can imagine then, when you call upon it when it comes to off-road stuff, it's going to be that much better as well. So the gearbox, really, really good. I think I would love to see a hybrid of this car, whether it's mild or plug-in, or a bigger engine. I think would really suit the nature of this type of vehicle, because I think you'd get some of the appeal of those more luxury cars within it, because it's well suited to have that kind of engine. Then we come to the suspension, where you have to understand, like the sound, like the engine, this is more on the side of truck than it is ever going to be those luxury 4x4s. There's a lot of body roll. It's better than the previous Land Cruiser in terms of judderiness when it's just normal driving, but that shuddery feeling is still there. I don't dislike that, because when I come into, now that my mind is set up to expect this to be more like, again, I keep coming back to it, G-Wagon or Defender, that's the exact kind of ride that I'm expecting out of this car, and it lends itself to that type of character. There is a lot of body roll. The steering is very light. You're not going to be driving this fast around corners, but your driving style changes, as I said, to adapt to that type of driving, where it's a much more relaxed type of driving. The sill here is in the perfect angle for that kind of pop your arm and your elbow on it, relax and just drive. And that's the type of flow that you get into when driving the Land Cruiser normally. Toyota really understands its customers. It really understands muscle memory, being comfortable within a car, you know, where the grab handles are, where all the mode switches are. I understand now where they were coming from with this car. Interior, specifically in terms of the logical layout, it is actually quite brilliant after having lived with it for a week. But my overarching point again is, don't come into this expecting those other 4x4s that are much more like cars and just happen to off-road. This is the opposite. It is an off-roader that just happens to be able to be used on the road normally, which I think is quite cool. Now, one thing that's great that they've added within this is the fact that you have the full assistance systems, like your lane tracking and self-steering, and that has been brilliant, because you don't think Land Cruiser and think that you're going to get that technology and that you can go on a motorway, let the car drive itself. and then go and do some off-roading as well. It's quite brilliant. It's well displayed on the driver's zone in front, and again, it's not something you expect in a car of this ilk. Land Cruiser's never had it, and I've really used it a lot in this week when I've had the car, and it's been great. It's been a great luxury side to this car. So very much still an off-roader that happens to be able to be used on the road, but many more arrows in its quiver in terms of being able to be used on the road. And I've gone into a style of driving that I'm really enjoying in this car. I could drive this every day and be very, very happy. It's just so different to, I'm sick of cars all driving the same. EVs, 4x4s, sedans, everything has to be absolutely perfect on the road. This isn't. It's got a grumbly engine, it's got steering that's light, it's a bit shuddery on the road, you know, a lot of body roll. And sue me, but I'm really enjoying it. Now let's talk about price and affordability, because 80k is a lot for any car, right? Even a car that you're getting this much value out of, it's a lot of money. And some will say that if you're not off-roading it, then you're not going to be getting the full benefit. You'll be paying for essentially a lot of what you're never going to use. But you know what, to me, it doesn't matter how much you spend with those other manufacturers, with other 4x4s, there's a certain charm in this that you'll never be able to spend enough money to get in those, because they can't do what this does. And if you did want that charm in other manufacturers, you'd be paying tons more to buy either the G-Wagon or the Defender of that ilk of car. But those cars are also more shouty, they're more in your face. This isn't like that. This has got heritage and a status that we've discussed that is pretty much like no other car in the world. It's not the perfect road car, but then I don't think the Land Cruiser was ever meant to be. Instead, this is an icon with heritage like pretty much no other, and it has cultural significance that is so varied depending on where you are in the world. And I don't think there's any other car like that. Generally, cars are all viewed the same around the world. This car, it has just the most interesting status and reputation when you look at it globally. This undoubtedly has its own character, not just in the way that it drives, which is undoubted, but also in the way that it looks and the way that it is inside the interior. And that to me it's worth the price of admission itself, because everything else drives and looks the same. This is not like those cars. And if you spec it right, get it in the right color, get it in a lighter color, then I think it looks absolutely stunning on the road as well. So guys, a huge thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this first Toyota on the channel. If you have, please do like, drop a comment, and that's pretty much it from me today. みんな今日はここまで見てくれてありがとう。また次回会おう。